there's so many banks out there that are just there again. All they stand for is great service, great people, and that's fine. But that's not going to draw anybody new in, and that's not going to cause somebody to just suddenly wake up one day and be like, oh man, I really want to bank with them.
Jay, what's up?
Nikki, how's it going?
Good. Can I just, in a lovingly way, comment about your wardrobe for a second?
Oh, it's very dark, just like my soul.
Oh, Jay, that can be further from the truth. But hey, speaking of brand authenticity,
Being who you are, I just take it in. I know who I am. It's all dark.
well, Jay, can I be the lightness to that? Like, we'll complement each other very well.
Yes, absolutely. We got good balance here. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about brand authenticity and what does that really mean in the FI space?
Wow, let's just start off with a big question this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for hitting it with the good one right there. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've had the opportunity to rebrand several credit unions, and the process in of itself was just, can I say, magical? And I'm going to be true to my brand authenticity because I thought it was magical, right? It's a game changer, but honestly, in my opinion, what brand authenticity is, man, I must need whatever's in your coffee cup this morning because I know you got something good in there, right?
I always do.
You always do. Anyway, for me, it was holding true to your brand promise, who you are, your mission, vision, values, from the top to the entry level positions of the credit union, but also explaining that in a way to your customers and or members in a transparency kind of way too, right? Like you want them to know who you are and what you stand for. And sometimes, honestly, it wouldn't appeal to everybody, but that's okay,
Yeah,
right?
really.
That's okay.
I think-
Yeah.
But why? Why does being brand authentic matter?
To me, um, you have to be true to who you are. You have to stand up for what you believe in. But not only that, but it's also going to set you apart from anybody else out there and being the same exact thing, correct?
Yeah.
Banking, finance industry, it's a commodity, right?
Yeah.
It's like having to fill up your car with gas. Like you need a transactional place. So why choose one or the other? Do you agree, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, you have to find a way to distinguish yourself in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
When you provide the same services as everybody else, obviously, like you said, it's a commodity. And although you can always come up with special promotions and offers that are a little bit different from others, at the core, those are one-time deals. The user experience is going to be that consistent exposure with that bank or credit union. And that's where brand authenticity really comes into play, right? You really
Yeah.
need that to maintain truth to yourself because it's easy to get somebody hooked on a promotion. But if the experience at the door isn't there or is inconsistent, then you've essentially just hooked them short term. And obviously, as a bank, you're not looking for short term relations. The value is in the long term.
You're absolutely right. And when you talk about your brand mission, vision, values, or even manifesto, there's lots of ways that you can call that too. But for me, when I would come into these FIs and I would look at those mission, vision, values from 1936, 1928, I mean, maybe there was one in the 50s, you know, maybe times have changed a little bit, right? Since those. And maybe
Yeah.
you rock those mission, vision, values from the get-go, but it's maybe time to look at some of those and really dig in and say, is this truly who we are today? Is this who we're attracting both employee-wise for your internal culture and your potential customers and members and even community partners, correct?
Yeah. And I think, you need to be as specific as you can be in that authenticity and your brand mission, vision, values, because the thing that we always hear and we kind of joke about internally is, the old "we care harder" message, right?
Yeah,
Well, we're just going to do better customer service. We're going to do harder customer service. It's like, how do you even validate that? How does anybody experience the difference there? So, obviously you want to provide a good experience. You want to provide the best experience
yes,
that you can, but it needs to feel different to consumers. Otherwise, there again, you have a good experience, but was it really different feeling? Was there value there, or was it just adequate? Was it just good? Right?
absolutely. So I think of some of those ads too, like, okay, so we've talked about mission, vision, values and setting those up to be authentic to
Mhm.
your brand, right? And
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about messaging too. I know we've kind of repeated this in a few of our podcasts before, like target messaging, um,
Mhm.
using the right imagery and things like that too. Even we talked about using dogs and getting those dog lovers of the world to pay attention to your brand too. But
Right.
so those messages are important, and I don't want to beat a dead horse with everybody, but the old marketing slang, you got to tell them 7 times, show them 10, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, but one of the things I want to talk about too is like if your brand is truly an outdoor brand, or you think about maybe you cater to the higher income levels and stuff like that too. Utilizing that same kind of message, tone of voice, their phrases will help as well, right, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. What would you say that sets a brand apart? How do you show the difference? What have maybe you experienced going through several different
Yeah.
FIs? Like, how did you go about identifying your brand differentiation?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And so Uh, fortunately, I've been able to do this at like 3 different financial institutions. And I think for the first part, when you first walk in and you've got a fresh set of eyes or you're looking around, you're just seeing that the things aren't jiving, right? What your tellers are saying on the front line isn't what's happening in the boardroom, is not happening
Mhm.
what's it's not what's being discussed with the board of directors. So first you need to identify that there's that disconnect, right? There
Yeah.
is not the same message, and everybody's kind of flying at their own way and have their own interpretation. So for me, it was really circling up and saying, hey, you guys, like, let's start back from basics. Who are we? What do we stand for? What's important to us, right? And so a lot
Hmm.
of times we would get our internal team in a room and just do a really quick SWOT analysis. And we have this process at Epicosy, and I've used it, and it's seriously a game changer to find out who you are, what you stand for, and align those and with your messaging to go after those people too. So that was kind of a really big game changer for me. But then, really, the thing that is so important, I think, is getting that internal buy in, right? Everybody
Yeah.
wants to know who they are, what they stand for. And then it's like a breath of fresh air throughout the whole company, organization. Everybody's on the same page now. They're not left to interpretation of your mission, vision, values. They actually took a
Yeah.
part of it and they have a huge stake in that going forward.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, like through that discovery process, you kind of find out it's like you find out your personality, right? What is your brand
Yes.
personality? What are the things that you like? What are the things that you don't like? What represents you? What doesn't represent you? And I think it's kind of like you mentioned, going through that process, it sort of aligns the team. Everybody on the team understands this is kind of our personality, and this is, you can be fun and quirky, or you can be fun and silly, right? And there's like
Yeah.
nuances within that. But one is going to be like you could be way over the top with it, and maybe that's the personality that the brand has, or you can be very, very subtle with the humor, and that's just, I think, one of the many ways that you can be brand authentic, because collectively you're almost surveying what does the organization feel like, and then through
Yeah.
that you're able to push it out there, because without having everybody on board, agreeing what you are and how to represent yourself and your personality, what you're going to have is people in charge, like you said. People on the front lines are going to give a user a different experience than the loan officers are. That's different than what the marketing message is saying. And that's where, it's sort of the concept of having customers come back over and over again really falls apart, is because there's no consistency. And, people
Correct.
want consistency. Like, naturally, we all want consistency in our lives.
Honestly, and I think that as an FI marketer, it's your job to identify the pain points, right? The disconnects, and then tie them all together so that, like you said, Jay, your front line is talking exactly how your loan officers are talking about, how even the janitor greets you at a door, or the pride that they take in everything. And that is super important from top to bottom, I think, too. So you're all on the same page.
Yeah. So show me, like, how do you present brand authenticity to consumers, to people that walk in the doors? How do you showcase your brand? Not just through like the advertisement, right? Not just through the
Yeah.
billboards, but like, how do you embed that and make sure that everybody's sort of living the brand voice?
So awesome question. And I'm going to tell you, there's not one answer, and you can't just do one thing and then just go, right? Living your brand is an everyday, every minute experience and conversation. And that is from how you answer the telephone to what your voicemail recording is. If you have a voicemail recording, it is how clean your lobby is. It's to how you interact with the community. It's to the community activities that you even support. So living your brand authenticity, and like you said, finding your personality. I'm just going to take community engagement, for example. You want to find an organization that aligns with your brand, correct? And then
Mhm.
you will wholeheartedly engage that. And that is part of your identity, then, too. You might be the FI that believes in providing homes for everybody. So, guess what? Habitat for Humanity is your thing, right? You might even
Yeah.
answer your phone that says, hey, we build dreams, we build homes, have a welcome to XYZ bank, or something like that. But living your brand is every communication, it's every smile, it's every phone call answered. And so I wish there was one easy magic wand. I've looked for it for years. I haven't been able to find it.
Oh,
Um,
shoot.
I know. I wish it was for all of our friends listening in too.
Right. Right.
But when you get your internal advocates on board with you, you'll find, and I've had the huge success of creating this team of advocates, and they come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, there's this message here that we need to change. It's not in our tone. And it's great
Mhm.
that they're identifying it, seeing it, and all on board to make sure that you're looking at every single touch point with your consumers and public.
Yeah. Yeah. Something interesting that you said earlier was, maybe your brand authenticity, maybe it doesn't appeal to everybody.
Mm,
Um, maybe I mean, every bank wants to do as much business with everyone, right?
right.
But I think when you think of the feasibility of doing that, being that bank, or just the sheer competition that you have in the space, maybe you need to really refine that audience. And it could still be a fairly broad audience, but maybe it's not all audiences, right?
Right.
So how would you go about like connecting with your audiences through your sort of brand authenticity?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And you're absolutely right. You can't be everything to everybody. Otherwise, we're back to the cheese pizza, Jay. We're back there.
Yep,
Yeah,
back to
and we
that
don't
cheese.
want to be in cheese pizza land. So
No.
I think what you need
Been
to,
in the warmer for too long. It's just been hanging out there
yeah,
with all the
it's
other
way
pizzas.
greasy. Yeah, the pepperoni's falling off now. Oh, I think some of the ways that you can connect with your audience is tell their story, right? You've got
Mhm.
members, you've got customers, and they have done things in their lives. I mean, maybe you have some people that just financed a car, took a cross country trip to run marathons. Like, if that's who you're going to be, if you say go out there and conquer your dreams. If you're the FI that's going to conquer dreams and you have people that are running marathons, highlight them in your ads. Talk about the great things that they're doing and how you support them. Relate and be where your customers and our members are, right? Showcase that
Yeah.
with the community involvement too, or when they're on the board. Sometimes your staff is on volunteer boards of directors. Talk about that. Talk about the important work that they're doing, giving back to the community.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good example, right? I almost even think of Apicosity. We're just marketing agency, but Eric, the owner, is all about the outdoors life, and he climbs mountains, and he has a goal to climb, obviously the tallest one.
Yeah,
And
he's
just
crazy.
because just because we're a marketing agency, or just because your financial institution is just a bank, doesn't mean you can't be an outdoor brand, right? Like, you
Absolutely.
can have the tones where you service in the financial space, but your passion is with being outdoors, or allowing people to live that outdoor life, right? Supporting those who have that dream, right? Or
Yeah,
to your previous example, right, of just like animal ownership, right? Maybe you just really love pets and you lean into that. And I think that will open opportunities, if you think about it, with partnerships that maybe you haven't explored yet before or thought of, because now suddenly your brand sort of stands for something, and you're intentionally trying to um, live within a space, right? And you're trying to attract audiences from a space. And that opens up a lot of possibilities to doorways of where you can go, both on the messaging side, on the creative side, on the partnership side. And that's where you can really distinguish yourself from others. There'll always be the promotions, but not every bank is going to be climbing mountains, right? So I think that's
exactly.
where um, you can really see the difference when you think about it, and how there's so many banks out there that are just there again. All they stand for is great service, great people, and that's fine. But that's not going to draw anybody new in, and that's not going to cause somebody to just suddenly wake up one day and be like, "Oh man, I really want to bank with them." It's just like, yeah, I had a good experience there.
Exactly. They have the most friendly people in town. Like, yeah, that's where I'm going.
Of
Best
all of the people in
smiles.
town, there's
Exactly. Exactly. But just like you said too, that creates those connections, and you think alike. And I want to do business with people that like the same things I do and have the same values. So that's going to be my choice personally too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So one thing I will kind of highlight, in our last podcast on social media, you told a really
Yeah.
great social media story. Um, we had a good pizza analogy on this one. Why don't you? And I kind of teed it up a little bit,
Ooh.
but why don't you talk about how explorers made a difference in their brand authenticity, and how they position themselves with their customers and members?
Yeah, I would love to. So, fortunately, Explorers was first known as Services Center Federal Credit Union. And yeah, like, is it a fax machine? Do I find my lost luggage there? Like, what is a service center in 2020, right? Like, what at
Yeah,
that point in time, what is a services center? And it could have been any one of those options. And can you imagine, like, SEO, right? Like little chance for services center credit union and stuff. So
yeah,
there were
yeah.
there were a lot of red flags and at the time they did name it after a human services center, which to all my credit union friends out there was at their SEG group, right? Select employee group. And so it just wasn't like pulled out of thin air. It did have its reasons. But of course, as times have changed, the name was dated. And so we did go through that rebranding process. We had the SWATs, we worked through with all the team, we had buy-in. And what we really keyed down to is the people in the area love the outdoors. They were very innovators. The branch was along the Lewis and Clark Trail, right, which was kind of cool. Um, the services center at the time was expanding their charter and heading across state lines. So they had a lot of really great things going for them. And when we came back with the name Explorers, we were just like, it fits. Like that was a really good name for all of the reasons I just listed. But Services Center had a very old mission, vision, values. And when we
Mhm.
renamed and we took the time to listen to our team members, and we did some focus group with members and did some brand perception studies too, we took a look at that. And what we came up with was a compass point. So we had 4 manifesto points on everything too, how we were going to make decisions as explorers going forward. And we're proud to say, like, no matter if we were in a team meeting, in our board meeting, any decision we made had to line up with one of those manifestos so that we could create our brand and our authenticity. Well, as you guys know, in 2020, we had a major news event, right? COVID hit. And I will never
Mhm.
forget that we launched Explorers on March 4th, unveiled the name. By
Wow.
March 13th, all doors to every branch were closed and we were in a pandemic. And you couldn't have just had a more perfect name because everybody was exploring new ways to live their life and how to
Hmm.
work and go to school and communicate with everybody. So we really played off on that, like everybody's exploring new ways. And the amount of people, once we took a stance and said, hey, this is who we are, we're innovators, we're not afraid to get our hands dirty, we're looking for new things, we're blue collar, we're out there living the land and working the land, we grew. It was amazing how many people just accepted that new name, that new way, the new branding, and it was like a beacon of light. You're like, oh, that's who you are. That's
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be. And it truly was great. I mean, and it continues to be great for them down there.
Yeah, and I think that's even great, right? You talk about the name of Explorers, and then you had this compass, right?
Yeah.
And I think even some of the internal naming structure was a little bit different or expanded.
It
Um,
was instead of having, I'm going to jump on that, Jay. I'm just going to cut you right off. But instead of
yeah.
having, this is kind of what I talked about too. Is it goes from every communication, from opening the door to members to how they get emails to how you answer the phone too. But it was job titles for us. I mean, we just didn't have loan officers anymore. You had financial guides, right? And we changed that. And
Yeah.
we answered the phone like, what can we help you discover today? And we used a lot of those terminologies too. So we lived the brand every second of every communication and every touch point that we possibly could.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, you really did find a way, not necessarily, I mean, you did reinvent yourselves,
Yes.
but found a way to represent your brand authentically
Hmm.
and wrap it into everything you did. And through that experience, there's no other place like Explorers, right?
There
Is
isn't.
you
Yeah.
go to any credit union around, and everybody's going to know who they are just because of it's the small changes that they've done as an organization to build that authenticity and to showcase it, right?
Hmm.
You're not working with a loan officer, you're working with a guide.
Correct.
It's not a huge change. It's not like you had to buy a bunch of fancy equipment, right? You didn't have to buy a bunch of software. It was just a subtle change
Hmm.
that really reflected who the brand is and where you're trying to go with it. And I think, me sort of summarizing that, but I think that's really the intention of being brand authentic and certainly in the importance of it. So,
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing, Nikki. Do you have any last thoughts on brand authenticity and audiences?
I just want to say I vibe with your brand, Jay. I really do. Like I think you got a good brand, dude. Don't change a thing.
The darkness,
I
and
love the
then you're off.
darkness.
Appreciate it, Nikki.
You
I'm
betcha.
glad somebody, not just my wife, but other people get me too.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you keep being you, Jay.
I absolutely will.
All
All right.
right. I'll see you next time.
All right.
Okay.